always step at the side when we come in. Feel it in your chest, the syllables get pumping. People on the streets that panic and start running. Words on loose leaf sheet, complete coming. I jump on my mind, I summon the rhyme, I'm dumping. Healing the blind, I promise to let the sun in. Sick of the dark ways, we march to the drumming. Jump when they tell us that they want to see jumping. Dad, I want to see some fist pumping. Risk something, take back what's yours. Say something that you know they might attack you for. Cause I'm sick of being treated like I have before. Like a stupid standing for what I'm standing for. Like this war's really just a different brand of war. Like it doesn't cater to rich and a fan.
All right, guys, welcome to Wide Awake Radio. I am your host, Charlie McGrath. It is the 27th day of April, Wednesday, and boy, do we have a good show lined up, a good program lined up for you tonight. It's going to be, if it's anything like the documentary Collapse, if we get any kind of insight into what's going on that was brought forth in that documentary, this will be certainly one for the record books, and definitely one we'll be posting up on the website as well. So if your friends or family couldn't make it, if they can't get here to listen, we have nearly 200 people in the chat room right now. If you're listening and you want to post questions in there, I'll try to take them at the bottom of the hour break for Michael or for Warren. Get in there now. Go to wideawakenews.com. Click on the Wide Awake Radio link. You don't want to miss the opportunity to pose your questions to somebody with such insight. Now, I'm going to do the show tonight. I might be able to get out of doing the bottom break and just do the whole hour with the conversation between myself and Michael and Warren. But I want to start it off with just giving a snapshot of where we are right now in this country. And then I want to bring Michael in because he's shown to have absolutely Nostradamuc abilities in predicting what's going to happen. So I want to give him time to explain, what has led to his thought process to attaining such an overview of political and geopolitical and economic situation for where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going. But to give you a snapshot, today we saw the economic terrorists continuing to march forward. We had a Federal Reserve Chairman giving a so-called press conference, and it turns out that it's mainly staged questions, staged answers, and touchy-feely. Let's pull the wool over the eyes of the public once again. And we saw the reactions. We saw the reactions in the dollar. It immediately tumbled. We saw the reactions in the precious metals. Silver shot up an obscene amount, over $2 at close high at the end of the day. And then we had, immediately after this press conference, the mainstream business media doing their job, being paid spokesmen for the too big to fail. They were out there leading with stories on how we need to throw the American people, how we need to create more debt in this country. Paul O'Neill, this is just day after day after day, we're being bombarded with this disinformation, bombarded with this propaganda to make us feel like this thing is under control. And I think Michael's going to show us that it's certainly not under control. And in fact, our only hope is to wake up and realize, that we are in the end stages of collapse in this country. Paul O'Neill came out today and uttered the phrases. I've been waiting for this to come out. We've had Bernanke coming out railing that we need to increase the debt limit. We've had Geithner coming out saying the exact same thing. They're stating that if it doesn't happen, we will have a collapse again in this country that'll make 2008 look like a walk in the park. And Paul O'Neill came out today and finally drew the comparison that I was waiting to see. And he said anybody who doesn't believe that we should raise the debt ceiling, and any of these representatives who want to say no to throwing us further into debt, past $14.3 trillion, they are actually America's version of Al-Qaeda. So the situation in the world is this. We're on 5 military fronts. We're currently in the longest war this nation has ever been in Afghanistan. We have the Middle East and North Africa boiling over. We have the mainstream media, along with our so-called representatives, working day and night to beat the drums of war, to get us into that area and keep us into that area in perpetuity. They say it's so we can spread democracy, so we can have color revolutions. They say it's we're thinking about our fellow citizens on this planet, and we want them to be just as free and live in a democracy just like we do. But the real reason everybody listening to me right now knows it is to control the energy supply on planet Earth. It is to control and to project Empire America around planet Earth. There's a snapshot of where we are. That's where we're at today, 2011. Now, our guest tonight predicted all of this and much, much more. And it goes back much further than, Charlie McGrath on Wide Awake Radio, Wide Awake News, or the YouTube channel. He's going back over 30 years, starting as a police officer in Los Angeles, morphing through what he's seen. Seeing the CIA deal narcotics, calling out the CIA director, John Deutsch, in 1996. Becoming an investigative journalist. For 30 years he's been crying in the wilderness. In fact, one of his sites was even called Crying in the Wilderness. And he's been telling people for this amount of time that this collapse is coming, and it's not something that can be stopped. It has to occur. It's a law of nature. It's a law of physics. It's going to occur. He's also an author. He's written The Decline of American Empire at the End of the Age of Oil. And also, I hope I get this right. You were the subject of the 2009 documentary Collapse, which I've watched at least 4 or 5 times, and you've also written a book called Crossing the Rubicon. Pardon my voice. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Michael. I greatly appreciate it, and I wanted to thank Warren also, because Warren has done just an awesome job for Wide Awake Radio, bringing us big-time guests like Michael, like Dr. Hartung. He was on about a month ago. Warren Pollock, he's also joining us via his vacation in Florida. Warren was a vice president of a Wall Street brokerage tech firm with over 250 clients. He's worked internationally in Canada and as well as Europe. He's consulted on everything from economics to national security. Welcome, both of you. Michael, Warren, welcome back. Warren, Michael, welcome to Wide Awake Radio.
Thank you. This is Mike. Let me correct a couple things. The old website is fromthewilderness.com.
Okay.
As in Voices Crying In. The archives are still there. 8 years of crackerjack investigative reporting, and our last big venture was to break the Pat Tillman cover-up, which resulted in a discipline of nine officers in the Army, 3 generals, and the resignation of Donald Rumsfeld. Those archives are still there. And the 2 books are Crossing the Rubicon, The Decline of the American Empire at the End of the Age of Oil, and the newest book, which is the companion book for the documentary Collapse, is called Confronting Collapse. And those are all available on my website, which is collapsenet.com. And I'll finish the commercial by saying I also have my own radio show, and I'm happy to be on yours, on the Progressive Radio Network every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific time, called the Lifeboat Hour.
and now you see why I was desperately trying to get a hold of you before the program started.
Yes.
Inevitably, I'll write information out. I did have collapsenet.com as your site. In fact, I have it pulled up here, and I'll be dumping that link into the chat room multiple times during the program. And also I'd written down you are the host of the Lifeboat Hour on the Progressive Radio Network. I'll contact you or your assistant after the program, and we'll get a banner put up at the website as well to link over to your website. But welcome to the program. Thank you very much for being here. Warren, are you with us too?
I'm just listening in.
Okay, very good. Well, let's get started. I've rewatched now Collapse 2 times in the last 24 hours. And just the predictions that you were making in 2009 that are coming true, I want to get into that in a minute. But I would like for you to explain to us how you've developed this ability to have this overview, this critical thinking of what's happening politically and geopolitically before it occurred. You called out the collapse in 2008. You called out where we're at right now. What gives you, Michael Ruppert, the insight that so many people seem to miss?
Well, I do not have a crystal ball, that's for sure, and I don't read tea leaves. I come from a family that was rooted in intelligence, so I was trained at an early age in that kind of critical thinking. My mother had been a cryptanalyst for the Army Security Agency and later NSA during Second World War and after, her work product going to the Secretaries of War and State and to President Roosevelt. My dad was a decorated Air Force aviator from World War II, B-17 gunner. He became an officer during the Korean War, flew in interceptors. And he went to work for Martin Marietta, now Lockheed Martin, and was liaison between Martin, the Air Force, and the CIA for all the boosters that put up spy satellites. So first of all, I had a very specialized way of critical thinking imbued in me. Then I became a cop. And I certainly didn't have an ambition to wind up where I am now, that's for sure. And the CIA tried to recruit me twice, and I caught I was being recruited to help protect shipments of CIA drugs into the country in 1976 and 77, and I refused. And I was forced out of LAPD. I wasn't fired. There were death threats, and it was clear that the department wasn't going to help me. But I had been trained as a cop, and I'd worked as a detective specializing in narcotics, and I developed a way of comparing what the press release says to what you actually see happening. And for me, it was a process of self-preservation at first, just to stay alive, to research, to investigate, to start going through news stories, to look for things that supported what I had seen, because the government said, oh, he's crazy, he's making this up, CIA would never deal drugs, blah, blah. And that evolved, because this was like pulling one worm out of a can. And okay, just as soon as I deal with this one little worm, and of course what you pull out of the can are millions of wriggly worms, on meth with bad breath. And so this ball kept getting bigger the more I pulled on it. For 18 years straight, until I confronted John Deutsch, my sole focus was researching covert operations, CIA, and drugs, and I became, over that period of time, extremely good friends with a great many former members of U.S. Army Special Forces and later Navy SEALs, and people from the agency who had left because they couldn't stomach what was going on. And I honed my research skills, and I started building what I call a map of just how things actually work as opposed to the way that they really do. I found it from the wilderness in 1998. I started really getting into economic issues then, and I started to understand very quickly, I would say at about 1999, it became clear that the global economy was not sustainable, that it was an infinite growth pyramid scheme, and it was corrupt beyond belief. And I spent the early years From the Wilderness doing major exposés, and I did that all the way up through 2005, of Bank of New York, AIG, Citigroup, all kinds of things like that, which kind of put me on the map as an investigative journalist. And then I began to see that money, the way money worked, was the biggest dominating factor, aside from energy, that ruled our world, and that it was more profitable to destroy things than it was to save them. That always when there was money to be made, the money was made both on the way up and the way down. It's more profitable now to foreclose on homes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to service a huge derivatives bubble. I wrote my first economic alert in 2001 on September 9th, 2 days before 9/11, predicting an imminent crash and warning then of a $1.1 trillion derivatives bubble, which is eating us alive now and going to kill us. But shortly after 9/11, and I'll be brief with this, I was approached by a geologist, Dale Allen Pfeiffer, who taught me about peak oil. And all at once, everything made sense, and I started looking into the relationships between energy and money, and that pretty much led to everything else. I remained doing strong investigative journalism. But really what I have done, and what I've tried to do with my 2 books and with the movie, is to share the map that I have made of the world so that those who study it, and it's happening at the CollapseNet, could read the map as quickly as I could and understand what's going on. And we're having, there's a huge awakening taking place in all these hard times we're having. So that's the best answer I can give on that.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, you've touched on so many things I have written down here. You know, let me. I mean, there's your background as far as how you've developed your ability to map out trends, if you will. You know, you're mapping out future trends. You call the collapse. You know, back before 9/11, you warn, and then you write about it till 2005. You call the 2008 collapse. People were not taking you serious. You know, this is from what I've taken from the collapse video. Are you getting to the point now where, you know, you're no longer a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, like many here are called on this program and on this website? But you're right. I mean, more and more people are waking up. Are you starting to gain traction in waking up the folks around you? And the reason I ask that, Michael, is because, you know, at the end of your video, you talked about an island where we dropped a nuclear bomb, or a hydrogen bomb, and you know, they put monkeys on this island, and you know, they trained 10 of them, and 10 of them were awake. They knew how to wash the coconut so they could eat it and be and not have the radiation exposure. And then when it got to from 10 being aware to the point where it was 100 being aware, then the whole population was aware. Are you getting closer to that point, do you think, today with the situation, the snapshot that I gave at the opening of the show? It's hard to hide it anymore, even with all the fluff and even with all the propaganda from the mainstream media.
What's happening now, man, is just breathtaking and heartwarming and reaffirming. Let me just backtrack a little bit. I was always taken seriously. I had 60 members of Congress as subscribers to From the Wilderness when our computers were smashed in Oregon in 2006, and all the major people would read us. Nobody would just say our name in public. That's a deal like Galileo. The Catholic Church had to lock him away and they couldn't speak his name. But what's happening now is, since the movie Collapse premiered at the Toronto Film Festival in September of 2009, it's, of course, it received unbelievably powerful praise from Roger Ebert, Variety, everybody. And it's been pirated more than 2 million times around the world. I've had no income from the film, but I get these little notices every time a new download site comes up. But what I have now is about 8,000 Facebook friends on my public figure page, and I got 4,000 on my 45,000 almost on my personal page. And CollapseNet, which is my new organization, which we started in June of last year, is now in 61 countries. And we can talk about that more later. But what I am seeing now is, for me, I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. And that's not because the world's in bad shape. It's because I am just so aware that so many people understand what the real issues are, that infinite growth is not possible on a finite planet, that this current system that we're living in is doomed, destined to fail, that the world is overpopulated, cannot support 7 billion people, especially with oil running out, because there's 10 calories of hydrocarbon energy in every calorie of food out there. And now especially that Japan is a mortal wound to the entire global economy, and we can talk more about that. But a great many people who have written on this subject, and I'm not alone. I mean, Marion King Hubbard was the prophet of peak oil back in 1949. He saw peak oil coming. And there are great writers and thinkers out there who all understand that what is needed now and what must happen is that there must be a change in human consciousness. That is the 100th monkey. That will be the new species of Homo sapiens. I'll call it post-petroleum man, that survives and hopefully brings a new way of relating to the world, or maybe back to the world after this. But it's taken place really fast, and it's a beauty to watch and experience.
Yeah, well, without a doubt, and I've seen, over the last, since 2008, when you start seeing it day to day in your coworkers, when you might be buying silver one day or buying, long-term storable seeds, heirloom seeds, and you're a crackpot. Well, now, when I go do my day job, I have people coming up to me asking me, telling me that they purchased, silver when it was $20 an ounce, or telling me they are putting in food storages so they can take care of themselves. So, and this is all on the work of people like you, people like you who have been, saying this is coming, saying that the mainstream media is lying to us, saying that they're trying to keep the status quo as the status quo, and you've lifted the veil on so many people's eyes. So, and if nothing else, Michael, you're with the culmination of your book, the latest book and the movie. I think you even said it in the movie. It's an extreme accomplishment in your life to have had the ability to develop this pattern of waking people up. So if for nothing else, your purpose has been served to get so many other folks prepared and ready for what's about to come. Now that kind of brings us up to the present. So I would like to get your current event prediction, or your current event thoughts. What do you see going on in the media today? What do you see going on with peak oil today? And you describe to us how you predicted this was coming and where we're going from here.
Well, the media media now reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. Great movie. And there's a computer in that movie called HAL 9000. And at the end, HAL 9000 has this breakdown. It has this nervous breakdown. And that's, to me, what the mainstream media looks like it's doing right now. It's absolutely absurd. The media is only a symptom, though. And they aren't the movers and shakers. They're almost deer-trapped in the headlights performing robotic actions inside the matrix without full conscious awareness, I think, on the most part, of what they're doing. But everything has changed. First of all, I started predicting the current events, and here I owe a great debt to the peak oil movement, to Colin Campbell, Matthew Simmons, Richard Heinberg, all the great people who taught me peak oil and a lot of the economics connected to that, is that we were going to go on to a bumpy plateau after world oil production had peaked, which is roughly what we started in 2008. And it would last for a short period of time where oil prices went up and down and we had a sort of recovery and didn't, and then oil prices went up too high and the recovery, blah, blah. But then we go off a cliff. And this is called the cliff event that's upon us now. Mm-hmm. And from an economic financial standpoint, it was very clear that none of this so-called recovery since 2008 was, it's all smoke and mirrors, and it was all based on printing money. And the key thing to understand there is that you can't eat money, and you cannot put dollar bills into your gas tank. You cannot wear dollar bills. They don't make very good clothing. They're only symbols, and what they are symbols for is energy, because energy is involved in producing everything we eat, wear, breathe, anything else. So if there's no energy to back up the money becomes worthless. That's pretty much where we're at now. There's $1.4 quadrillion in derivatives out there that are financial instruments that are all essentially credit lines, and they're all going to come due at once. And it was clear that the U.S. dollar was going to fail. China was going to dump the dollar. I started predicting a dollar dump in about 2000, which was clear was going to happen someday. And that looks like it's upon us now. But the key thing to understand is Japan has changed everything. Everything from top to bottom, inside out. What was going downhill very fast is now a supersonic jet fighter going toward the ground at Mach 3, thanks to Japan. So
let's get in.
Okay.
Let's get into that, and I know Warren's going to have a question on this topic as well. Japan, the world's third largest economy. Japan, who was in the headlines or in the headlines for literally a split second, and now we're trying to be treated to the latest titillating event, which I guess is this wedding going on in the UK. But Japan, you're right, it's done for. I mean, it's the third largest economy on the planet, and it's as you described, a gaping wound. This is an integrated planet. And this is completely underplayed by the mainstream media, isn't it?
Japan is a vital organ. It's like the liver, the heart, the lungs, to the whole body of global human industrial civilization. The whole body is going to die because of Japan. And the reason for that is the primary reason is supply chain disruptions. With globalization, there are companies around the world who rely largely on high-tech chips, microcircuits, electronic components that come from no place else in the world. They buy them. Siemens in Germany buys them. Texas Instruments here buys them. Of course, we know that Ford, GM are all shutting down plants all over the world, from plants in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico to Great Britain to South Africa. All those Toyota, Honda, Nissan factories are shutting down. The global economy, there will be no major corporation who will be able to show growth in their first quarterly earnings report after Fukushima. And yet all of this borrowed printed money from the Federal Reserve, this absolute insane nonsense that Ben Bernanke, I call him, is and all the financial meisters in Europe and elsewhere are doing. All of that is based upon an assumption of growth. And even though all the books are cooked everywhere, the one thing that's watched in all the markets is quarterly earnings statements, because that's how the stockholders know what kind of dividends they're going to get and what their shares are worth. Those are watched like hawks. And so it's not going to be possible for Ford or for Texas Instruments or for Alcoa, many other companies, Siemens, and any of them to come back and show growth in the quarter following Fukushima. They're all going to show big hits. That's when all the financial instruments cave in. I mean, this is something, as I said in my last alert on CollapseNet, that a caveman could see coming. And clearly all the signs are starting to emerge. Just over the weekend, China, the Xinhua news agency in China, which is the official state news agency, ran a statement from the chairman of the People's Bank of China, that's about as official as it gets, that China was going to sell $2 trillion of their dollar holdings. That's the dollar dump. The dollar has been the global reserve currency since the end of the Second World War. Now it's valueless. The dollar is more anemic now than it has been at any time since 2008. And now, when you see China dump $2 trillion, Japan has announced it's going to have to sell, I think 75 billion or more dollar holdings to serve their pension funds after Fukushima. Everybody else is realizing the dollar's going to flush, and then everybody dumps it, and that creates a situation called hyperinflation, which is different from inflation. Hyperinflation is when nobody in the world wants to hold a particular currency. All we're experiencing at the moment is very hot inflation, price rises due in oil and food is a whole other area we also should talk about. But all this is coming down now, and Japan has just pulled the rug out from the fingernails that were holding on to the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, absolutely. And Warren, I know you probably have a question, so I want to get you in here. Let me just make a quick announcement. We're not going to take the break. Obviously, we're past the bottom of the hour. We're going to just continue right on through to the end of the program. So I'm going to dump collapsenet.com's web address into the chat room. Once again, we've had over 200 people in there for the show. So you guys visit his site, and I'll make sure to have a link up on the front page of Wide Awake News at the end of the program. Warren, do you have questions, especially on supply chain? These are things you're always coming on the program and talking about. We're integrated supply chain interruptions. Japan, it's underplayed. Do you have questions for Michael?
Well, I just want to talk to Michael a bit about our approach, because we're reaching similar conclusions, Charlie and I. And through this radio show, we've had this dialogue where we talked about the supply chain. We talked about the reserve currency being a function of empire being a function of the access to oil being priced in not only the price you see in the pump, but also add into that the $1.2 trillion worth of military projection, which we have to put into the picture. And of late, what we've been seeing is the same thing that you are seeing, which is the lack of information about Fukushima. And you know for a fact that it is a pivotal economic event. 2 weeks after the event, we talked about the supply chain. We were the only ones at that time doing this. We also have people that are working with us, Dr. Jerm Berninger, who've been forced off the air. He had said that this was a decimating blow to the world and Japanese economy. And they forced him off of the air in Germany, and basically he basically disappeared. But my question is to you: how does the military fit into the future picture of the country in the process of collapse? And we've been looking at this domestically. When everything fails, you have an internal security state. That's what we see happening. But internationally, what happens to this huge military? Seeing that it's been trying to project power in Libya and all throughout the Middle East.
Well, okay, we have to deal with this like short-term, long-term, because there's all kinds of big issues here. And I should stress that in my background, too, I had a military affairs editor at From the Wilderness who wrote the Stan Goff series for Stan Goff, who was a retired Master Sergeant from U.S. Army Special Forces. He was Delta Force. He had taught at West Point. I'm friends with retired Commander Dick Marcinko of SEAL 6, and I have spent a lot of time around military personnel, and I have pretty good insights into this. First of all, I've been saying all along, and I'm absolutely right, that martial law from the standpoint that most people think about it, which is troops on every corner, is absolutely not going to happen in this country. I have read the Homeland Security Act and the Patriot Act from cover to cover, which is enough to almost give you a stroke. And it's clear that the priority of the United States government is to protect critical infrastructure only, not the people, not to enforce law. There might be some green zones, but my best calculation shows that there's at most only 13, and I'm probably off by a couple, combat brigades in CONUS, the continental United States. That's not enough troops to impose the kind of martial law that has been foisted. There are no concentration camps. And that's very simple if you think about it. The concentration camp spin was put out there as a red herring by the government itself to make people focus on the wrong issues. It costs money to build concentration camps. People have to be fed. You have to pay the guards. You have to have the resources and the trucks. And I have said all along that what would happen when collapse really hit and the United States of America broke down, which is going to happen any minute now, is that the powers that be, the financial elites, would react exactly as they did during the Great Depression, which was they did very little to help the people who were starving, but they became a rapidly migrant workforce that would move themselves, transport themselves, scavenge and feed themselves, die along the way to get to a place where they would take a really cheap job. That didn't cost any money, and it didn't involve any resources. And all the research that I've been doing at CollapseNet on our World News Desk, it shows very clearly that police departments and state police agencies are being cut back drastically all over the country. I got a friend in Camden, New Jersey. Half the police department's laid off. So what we're going to look at when massive civil unrest comes again, which I'm certainly by this summer, and I've been wrong on dates a couple of times, but I've never been wrong about what the picture was going to look like. That it's going to be everybody fend for themselves. Critical infrastructure areas, maybe the LAX and the port of San Pedro, et cetera, those will be protected. But the rest of us are going to have to fend for ourselves. Now, overseas, I think we're looking at eventually something like, Rome's lost legions. We might have sent people over to Afghanistan that we might not be able to afford to bring back someday. The world is rising up against the United States all over. It's kind of like the Lilliputians attacking Gulliver. But these challenges are now serious, very serious, and we are stretched extremely thin right now from a military standpoint. My greatest fear, quite frankly, if things get much worse and governments lose control, is an all-out nuclear war, which is a very likely possible scenario, which might mean the end of all life on the planet.
Warren, did you have a follow-up on that?
Well, no. I mean, again, our theories differ a little bit, and the time frame differs a little bit, but we can certainly see right now the U.S. almost in a total state of denial from a managerial point of view.
Yep.
And do you think that someone out there sees the picture in the leadership cast, or do you think they're just sort of in total denial?
What I think is that in a previous extinction, the dinosaurs died. They could not adapt. And that's what evolution is all about. Dinosaurs could only do what dinosaurs do. They didn't have the ability to do or to think any differently than their brains allowed them to think. And really what I think we're watching now, I think some people truly understand and are truly evil, and I think they plan on trying to recreate the same mess on the other side of collapse, when human population is maybe somewhere between 3 and 6 billion people less than it is now. But I think for the most part, it really is people inside the matrix who are not capable of seeing or fully understanding. They're operating from their limbic brains.
Let me ask you this, because go ahead, Warren. I'm sorry.
Well, that just makes sense, because if you can see people are doing just what they did yesterday, and everyone is backwards looking, and they're not forward looking.
Right.
So you have a Bernac, as you mentioned, is just going to print money infinitely, and going to say everything is okay and try to talk the situation down. These people are just sort of playing the roles that they're cast, and they're reading the script which they are familiar with. So I'd agree with you there. Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, I wanted to say, because I know in your presentations, I mean, you've given presentation and lectures in several countries and scores of them. You've talked a lot about a simple graph. And I would like you to. We got plenty of time left, so I'd like you to talk a little bit about this law of nature that we are living in right now, where we see this true hockey stick, which is the population on planet Earth.
Yeah.
That converging, what led to this population explosion, and what's going to lead to its decline?
Well, that's the only graph or chart, the graph that I've used in almost all of my lectures. It was in the movie. That was given to me by Colin Campbell, who is an oil geologist who is essentially now the godfather of the peak oil movement. He is the one who mentored all of us who are here now, and along with people like Ken DeFaze of Princeton. But the graph shows the line of human population, and you can start from 10,000 BC or the time of Christ, whatever. Human population was stable at just under 1 billion people throughout history. There was a dip for the bubonic plague, but then slowly after the Cartesian Revolution and the beginning of the industrial era, we started to apply machines, and then we applied coal, and the population curve started to rise, to climb at maybe a 40-45 degree angle. But then with the advent of oil, human population went vertical, like an F-18 on afterburners, and it now rests at around 7 billion people. And all of those people, all of that population, over 1 billion, has come into existence solely because of oil, for no other reason. There are 10 calories of hydrocarbon energy in every calorie of food eaten in the industrialized world. Now, I've just moved to Sebastopol, and I'm growing organic here, and that's the big priority for everyone now, is to relocalize food production as quickly as possible. But when you take away the oil now, you will take away the people. And we have past peak oil that happened in 2006, and we are having a global food crisis now of unprecedented proportions. These are food riots happening not just in the Middle East, North Africa. They're happening in South Africa, in India, in China. Civil unrest is growing at an amazing rate in China. And we will see food riots globally by the end of the year. We bring them to you on the World News Desk. That's the stuff the mainstream usually doesn't want you to know. But that's where we are with that, and this event, this kind of event throughout biology, is the same. Whether it's caribou who wind up on this fertile island with no predators, or whether it's bacteria in a petri dish, population curve. Whenever they reach a point of unlimited energy, unlimited food supply, and no opposition, populations always go straight up like this, and then they crash. Usually to the point of extinction.
Well, and so is this why we see now this desperate attempt to control the supply chain of energy? That they're surrounding it in all kinds of patriotic fervor. We're trying to spread democracy, but is this really the last ditch effort, trying to get the last drops before it's total anarchy, and we see this fall off of human population?
That is what my first book, Crossing the Rubicon, The Decline of the American Empire at the End of the Age of Oil, is all about. 600 pages. It's in the Harvard Business School library. It's got 1,000 footnotes, and it's not a difficult academic read by any means. But basically what that book says is that Dick Cheney was well aware of peak oil, and so were the neocons and the powers that be in Washington before him. The National Energy Policy Development Group, the highly secret task force on energy that Dick Cheney started right after they took office, before 9/11, was basically a saying, okay, we're running out of oil, we're going to hit peak. Who has the oil? Who do we have to invade? What do we have to do to get it? This is the result of that, and that's where I described almost all the events that are taking place now.
Yeah, and I want to address. I'm fielding questions, Warren. I'll go to you right here after this. But I'm fielding questions in the chat room. A lot of people, frankly, a lot of people still don't believe in peak oil. I think you have to be completely out of your mind to not. If you look at, look at Saudi Arabia. That they're going offshore now because they can't get it on land. Same thing in Libya. Same thing in the United States. Same thing around the globe. It's becoming harder to find. When they do find it, they call them massive reserves. And when you tally out the numbers they're talking about, you're talking maybe 6 months' worth of supply in somewhere like Anwar. Will run the country for 6 months with the reserves that are there. So to think that peak oil hasn't occurred, that is truly living with your head in the sand. And that this is the reason why we are committing lives, American lives, to securing this supply that's left.
I don't waste a minute of time on those people. I don't anymore. One of my favorite sayings is that if you're in a camp and with a bunch of campers and a bear attacks the camp, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the slowest campers. And so all of those people who don't believe in peak oil, they're really slow campers. Me, I'm just got on 2 acres in Northern California, and I'm putting food crops in, and so I'll cry as the bear eats them.
Yeah, you had that line in your video. It was certainly hilarious. Warren, did I interrupt you with a question?
Well, yeah. Today T. Boone Pickens was on the news media via CNBC begging the President Obama to build out our natural gas reserves and to tap all this gas that has to be extracted via fracking. So, and he was amazed that there was no national energy policy to address our natural gas resources in lieu of oil. I was wondering if you could just address that as a question.
Boone Pickens is a damn criminal. How's that?
That's okay.
If it was up to me, he'd be behind bars. Fracking is one of the most poisonous, obnoxious, toxic, destructive, wasteful, net energy-losing ventures in the world. And the dinosaurs are trying to sell that to us as if it's some kind of cheap... So ask the people whose tap water you can light and it flames. Ask the people who are dying of cancer. Ask the animals that have been poisoned. Ask why it's either Pittsburgh or Philadelphia has banned fracking, why New York is moving to ban fracking. It kills people. It destroys fresh water. And in case nobody's noticed, we're also running short of fresh water on this planet. All Boone Pickens wants to do is make another couple billion selling this stuff while killing everything else on the planet.
Mike, we Charlie and I described this as becoming an unperson. So maybe you could just talk about that, Charlie. Just explain that, if you could.
Well, it's people who are in the way of securing energy. The people who are in the way in this country, recently, not even a year ago, or basically the crisis started a year ago, is in the Gulf of Mexico. We have 20 million people living on the Gulf. We don't. It's like they're like the Fukushima victims. We just don't talk about it anymore. These things stay in the headline for 2 or 3 days, and then we move on. In the case of the Gulf oil spill, it was there for a few months. The largest oil spill in the history of the planet, and suddenly they cap it off, and a month later, everything's back to business. Go vacation in the Gulf of Mexico. But the people who are sick and dying down there, they become unpeople. They vanish off the radar. The mainstream media doesn't cover them. The same thing goes with the victims of fracking and so forth and so on.
We talk about the Gulf a lot at CollapseNet. We have not forgotten the Gulf. My dear friend, the late Matthew Simmons, was also one of the giants in the peak oil movement. He died
mysteriously
shortly after declaring the truth that the Gulf of Mexico is dead, which it is. And we keep track, and we post reports all the time about people coming down with cancer, skin rashes, leukemia, body parts, rotting, children getting sick. Yes, that was murder. And I said it was murder on CollapseNet when it happened. And it is murder by the United States government and BP. Those people down there have been poisoned. And there are more of them down there right now dying than there are at Fukushima, but Fukushima is nowhere near under control, and we're way on top of that at CollapseNet.
Yeah, and it's funny because well, it isn't funny, it's terrifying. The 25th anniversary of Chernobyl was just happened the other day, and the mainstream media, it was driving me insane because they were calling it the worst nuclear meltdown in history at a power generating plant. And it's nobody. There is no reporting anymore, and I don't want to get off on another subject because we're running out of time. But the idea that Chernobyl was bad. Well, how many reactors do we have melting down at Fukushima right now that are in full, complete, and total meltdown? This story is like the Gulf. They want it to go away, and they can make it go away by just ignoring it. Unfortunately.
Well, that's where everything comes to a head, and that's why I come back to the fact that by July, it's going to be impossible to hide all this anymore. It's going to be so obvious to almost everybody on the planet. I mean, that's why we're seeing this big awakening now, because people are having a much harder time denying or dismissing what's going on around them. Gasoline is well over $4 a gallon where I am. Food prices are going through the roof. There's going to be 1.1 billion people at risk of starving to death this year. We're looking
now,
at...
you called this in 2000, in the video, I don't mean to interrupt you, but in 2009 you called this, you said the collapse of 2008, the cover-up that was occurring, it's not going to get better, and when everybody is going to realize it is when the next time oil starts to skyrocket. It's about to cross $114 a barrel again. The food prices you've already covered several times. It's going to be worse than it was in the 2007-2008 run-up in food prices. So give us a quick timeline of what you think's coming in the next 6 to 12 months.
Oh, I think we're through a looking glass by this summer. What it's going to look like on the other side of the looking glass, I'm not sure, but I have some ideas. I think there's something else that's important to mention quickly, which is it's now becoming clear and being admitted in the press that Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil producer with 25% of the known reserves on the planet, has passed its peak. It's not capable of increasing production. That'll destroy the financial markets too. We will easily see 150 oil this year. And at some point, as it happened in 2008, there's going to come a point in time when people can't borrow anymore to buy gasoline, et cetera, but now we go off the cliff. So what I see for sure is major civil unrest. Now, don't forget that we also have a movement which I predicted very clearly starting last November in great detail to break public employee unions all over this country. And what's going to happen is at some point in time this year, 4 or 5 states are going to file bankruptcy under a new law being proposed by the Republicans. States can't file bankruptcy now. And once they file bankruptcy, all the pension plans are broken. All the pension funds have already been looted. They're disappeared. The wage contracts, the benefits disappear. And you are going to see humongous civil unrest throughout this country. That's unavoidable. I'm standing by that prediction thoroughly. You will see massive inflation. Should China dump the dollar, your dollars will become virtually useless overnight. So if you've stored up cash, wait for the Chinese to start dumping. When you hear that that's happening, go out and spend your dollars while they're worth something. If you have a lot of money, buy gold. I've been recommending that people buy gold since it was $3.50 an ounce, and I got called crazy for saying it would go to $500. Here we are. That's important. And at CollapseNet, you will find an absolutely free lighthouse directory of more than 1,300 hand-picked entries, very neatly categorized, referring you to sites all over the world. There's a whole universe of people who have been preparing this for a long time and who are eager to share all the information that we have about the things you need to think about, do, consider. And a lot of this work has been done for people already, and that's at CollapseNet, the Lifeboat Directory, absolutely free. And what you need to do is to step on the other side, step out of the matrix, and find all of us who are living on this side of it, because we're here to help.
Well, and with about a minute left, I want to throw it to Warren to see if you had any last questions for Michael.
Nope. Just want to thank you for being with us, and I'll leave it to you, Charlie.
All right. Well, you covered a lot of the questions that were coming in into the chat room. As far as the one question I see in there that's stunning to me is when is the collapse going to happen? And I think it's obvious if you have eyes, we're in it. I mean, this is it.
Yeah,
Michael, we are there. I mean, as you've been speaking, the dollar has fallen 30 basis points. It's now sitting at 73.05.
Oh, really?
The things you have been predicting, especially, I'm discounting now everything that happened prior to 2009 and the movie. That's all proven to be correct. the things you're predicting just in that 2009 documentary are unfolding before our very eyes. And I don't mean, in the last couple weeks or months. I'm talking right now. I mean, with Bernanke coming out today trying to shore up confidence in the dollar, with the Chinese announcing they're going to cut 2/3 of their U.S. dollar-denominated holdings, $2 trillion worth. This is going on right now with the unrest we see spreading throughout Europe. We're told it's quelled with more debt and more burden, more austerity, with the Middle East erupting, with North Africa erupting. Michael, your predictions have been right on. So you're saying 2011 is the year of full-on civil unrest in this country, no doubt in your mind.
It's called collapse, and the U.S. and the United States cannot remain a whole nation throughout this. I guarantee that, too.
I greatly appreciate your insight. I greatly appreciate your work. His website is collapsenet.com. I put it in the chat room. I'll do it again before I sign off tonight. I'll also get a link up on wideawakenews.com. Michael, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your passion, and I appreciate the work you've done on behalf of humanity. Warren Pollock, thank you very much for joining us tonight as well. Everybody stay tuned. Jeff Rintz is coming up next. We'll see you tomorrow with Dex talking about what's going on in the markets. Again, Michael, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Warren, have a good night. Everybody in the chat room, thanks for tuning in. Over 200 people for most of the show. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Peace. Be well.
The rest of the world watching at the end of the day, both scared and angry, like, what did he say?